I'm David Hackoff, Executive Director of NewFest, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our virtual conversation series as part of the New York LGBTQ Film Festival. The festival is completely underway. We have 120 brand new LGBTQ films available to watch virtually throughout the country. So if you haven't already dug into all of the amazing films that we have, please visit www.newfest.org and take a look at the incredible lineup of films that we have. Several of those films address issues of LGBTQ global advocacy, issues around the country, in Brazil for the film Your Mother's Comfort, in Germany and Iran for our closing night film No Hard Feelings, and Poland for the film The Flashpoint. And so we wanted to have a conversation about global LGBTQ advocacy, what was happening around the world with our siblings, and what we as Americans can do to help. This is one of many conversations that we're having as part of the festival. We're also having conversations around queer journalism, queering the vote, about centering Black and trans queer voices in film, about the BIPOC film canon, and several more. So again, visit our website to see all of the conversations that we're having. But we're really, really excited about this conversation. We have some incredible guests who are doing really meaningful work for very important organizations. And we have a very distinguished moderator who I am pleased to welcome. His name is Adam Ely. Adam is a community organizer and a writer and the founder of Voices For, which is an activist group committed to advancing global queer liberation. And Adam has on his website, and I think this is a really incredible statement, a thesis statement for this conversation, and really a thesis statement for the festival and what it means to be a responsible queer citizen. Adam believes queer people anywhere are responsible for queer people everywhere. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome Adam Ely.
Hi, everyone. Hi, NewFest. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to be here, and we have two incredible guests representing two incredible organizations. And so I just want to dive right into it so that way we can hear from them as much as possible. I'm thrilled to introduce Kimhali Powers, the Executive Director of Rainbow Railroad. Hi, Kimhali. And I'm also thrilled to introduce Maria Sjödin, the Deputy Executive Director of Outright International. And so, hi, everyone. The first thing that I want to ask you, and I think, Kimhali, we can start with you, is what exactly is Rainbow Railroad? And what exactly do you do?
Hi, thanks, Adam. Rainbow Railroad is an international organization. We were founded in Toronto, Canada, but we are a Canadian and US-based international charitable organization. And our mission is to solely help LGBTQI persons find safety. You know, for the general purposes of this conversation, what that usually means is, you know, helping people who are persecuted because of their sexual orientation or gender identity find a pathway to safety. Most often that includes having to relocate to another country where they can live their authentic lives as themselves, free of persecution. But that also sometimes means temporary relocation within their country of origin as well. So we've been doing this work since 2006. We are proud to have helped over 900 people find a pathway to safety during that time. And, you know, our ultimate goal is to be part of a global LGBTQI movement where people are able to live their lives free of persecution anywhere in the world. I think most of the people that we help would rather stay home with their families and their communities, but too often are not. And so we are proud to play a small part in helping those who are facing imminent danger find safety.
Got it. Beautifully, a beautiful mission and beautifully said. Maria, the same question to you. What is Outright International and what do you do?
Thank you so much for that question. For those who are new to Outright, we're a 30-year-old organization dedicated to fighting for the human rights of LGBTIQ people around the world. We have staff in 8 countries and our global headquarters in New York City. And the way that we work is always by working in partnership and by strengthening the global LGBTIQ movement by supporting grassroots organizations and activists worldwide. We produce a lot of groundbreaking research and do data collection, because if we can't prove what's happening, we can't get decision makers and people in power to take notice. And the way that we achieve change is by advocacy, where we hold governments and development agencies and key stakeholders accountable for the inclusion of LGBTIQ people and the protection, of course. And our model is built through partnerships. We always work with groups and activists in the countries where we try to achieve change, because we don't believe that you can never parachute rights into another country. You always have to change society from within. And we, as an international organization, in partnership, can help accelerate that change.
Got it. Okay. So as 2 people that are focusing on global LGBT issues, I was wondering if you could tell those watching a little bit about what are some of the current issues that queer people around the world are facing, and what are some places where those issues are particularly present. So I know that's sort of like 2 different questions. Kimhali, maybe we'll start with you and then we'll go to Maria again.
Sure. I think when we think about hotspots, I think there's some usefulness to that term, because it focuses people's attention on a certain area. It also suggests that there is not a regular occurrence of violence in some of these countries, which is unfortunately the case. So we don't tend to look at our work in the lens of hotspots. We tend to look at the kind of global picture. We know many viewers might not realize that there's still over 70 countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy, and there are even countries that may not criminalize same-sex intimacy, by which being LGBTQI plus is problematic, and multiple countries that impose a death penalty, and the legal situations in those countries is one issue. What's crucial is kind of how people are persecuted in those countries, and whether state actors, whether it be police, governments, etc., willfully perpetuate violence and crime surrounds the community. And so, it's happening in too many countries, and we monitor those situations regularly. Rainbow Railroad now receives, unfortunately, over 3,000 requests a year. Last year's 2,800 requests from 120 different countries. And when there's 195 UN member states, that's a significant amount of our population. And so we are working with our allies on the ground and international organizations like Outright that does great work, kind of looking at the global landscape, and then of course keeping our eye on specific instances or situations that are troubling. Right now, again, I think it's useful to pinpoint areas that are well known, that are in the news currently. I think we're all concerned about the situation in Poland, as an example. But there are also continued flare-ups in countries that don't get a lot of notice. There's regular persecution of LGBTQI people in countries all around the world. I can say right now, countries like Yemen or Jamaica or Indonesia as recent examples. And so we continuously monitor when there's like a specific time-sensitive situation, but also look at the global landscape as well.
Got it. Thank you. And Maria?
Yeah, I agree with Kimhali. We're also not very fond of talking about particular hotspots because, of course, LGBTIQ people can be persecuted and discriminated pretty much anywhere. I mean, no country has a perfect record. But that said, I mean, the countries where same-sex relations are criminalized and where there is like an active persecution, those, of course, are at the top of sort of the list of countries where we need to work. But there's also, I mean, the authoritarian shift that we've seen in the world, where we have, in many countries, strongman leaders who want to show, who want to use LGBTIQ people as scapegoats for all kinds of things. That there is an ongoing backlash. And Kimhali already mentioned Indonesia. That's a good example, a country that actually does not criminalize same-sex relations, but where we have seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years increased persecution and more active persecution. And so it's important to have a focus on those countries where that is happening, but also to see the opportunities where there are shifts, like Sudan, for example, that actually recently removed the death penalty as a punishment for same-sex relations. That's an opportunity to try to move things forward. So it's always kind of a mix, and sometimes actually you see that in the same countries where there is a movement that's emerging and you see an increased visibility, that also means that people can become targets. So I think it's really important to have a global outlook and to sort of know that things can happen in a lot of different places, and you have to be able to respond and react to that.
Got it. Okay, and so because there are different issues across different places, and keeping up and maintaining this global lens, which both of your organizations do, why is it important for Americans, but also queer people all over the world, to continuously keep a global view of their community?
Maria, I'm gonna let you start with that.
Yeah. Sorry, I know that's kind of like a broad question, but why is it important for Americans to know about what's happening, and queer Americans to know about what's happening all over the world?
I mean, I loved the quote from you at the beginning. Like, we're responsible for our siblings everywhere. That's very much how I personally feel. And I really think it is important for Americans, you know, whether someone likes to travel to other countries or not, but to know and to stay informed about what's happening, so that people can, I want people to be engaged and to care, and to not just care when they see something horrible on television once, but to sort of stay engaged and stay informed, you know, throughout the year and throughout the years, and be supportive when they can. And one thing that I'm originally from Sweden, and one of the things that I think anyone who does not live in the US see all the time is that the United States has an outsized impact on the culture of the world. So when something, you know, when news breaks in the US, it ripples across the world. And this goes from all kinds of things, but like people respond to it, and they notice it and they hear about it. And so I really think it's important for Americans to also make a bit of an effort to hear and to listen to what's happening in other places.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I want to answer the question. I'm going to further that question and answer it in 3 different ways. I think the first thing is, you know, I just want to echo Maria's point that the role of the United States in the international stage is crucial. And there's 2 ways that it's crucial. One, still financially. I know we are having, I know we are witnessing, particularly in this administration, which might appear to be a more isolationist approach to international matters, you know, whereas I think we thought we were moving towards a more globalized way of looking at our human rights work. I'll say, regardless of what's currently happening or your thoughts in this administration. The United States is still one of the largest donors of international support, and still is a really important player. So I think just by way of advocacy, for example, when I'll give you a specific example in relation to Chechnya, for example, as a time where strong leadership and strong advocacy was important, and when advocacy from the United States would have played a really important role during that time. And that's similar to any of the hotspots or any of the countries that we talk about. Another example is there was a response in Egypt a number of years ago, and the United States has a crucial role in that region. So the way that global citizens can kind of push government and government officials to actually respond to these situations is crucial. Second thing I'd say is, we are in a remarkable time right now where we are paying close attention to the continued unjust deaths and murders of Black people. And I would say we need to extend that conversation to Black trans folks and, of course, Black and brown people in general. I think the same thing is for our queer liberation movement, right? I think for those who are in allyship for this movement that we're in, I think the same thing applies to the international queer liberation movement, right? We can't be free until we're all free, right? Which is like a less eloquent version of your quote, which I agree was pretty important. And so, and particularly for Rainbow Railroad, the majority of people that come to us for help are Black and brown folks. And so I think we always have to continuously stand in solidarity with folks who do not have the same rights and policies as we do. And the third thing I'll say as a personal note to this question is, I was born in Canada and from the Jamaican diaspora. And I realize I am talking to you on this panel because of the privilege that comes from being born in Canada. I'm also very fortunate to have a family and community that was supportive of me being an out person. And what brings me to do this work, and I think why every American should be focused on this work, is a conversation that I had with my mother in Jamaica, where Jamaica is a really funny place because it has a problematic issue with homophobia, but it's also a gorgeous country that many people vacation on a regular basis, and both can be true. And while she was vacationing there, she was learning. We were talking about our work, and she made a statement that if I was not born in Canada, that I could very much be one of the people that we are seeking to help. And it was a really powerful moment for her because the light bulb went off for her. But we live in this we have this kind of geographical lottery, whereas we don't know where we are going to be born. We do not know the circumstances around us. And by definition of the three of us having this conversation, we are privileged. And by the definition of the people watching this, most likely are in a position of privilege. And I believe that as a result, we have a responsibility to be global citizens and look out for those who don't have rights and policies that we do. I know that was a very long answer to that question, but a couple of points I thought would be important to mention.
No, that was beautifully said. It was beautifully said on both of your parts, and I think that it's pretty clear the three of us are certainly aligned on that. And so my next question is, what can Americans or people, as Kimhali so beautifully said, people that have won the geographic lottery and that maintain other privileges on top of that geographic privilege, whether it be white privilege or monetary privilege, et cetera, what are some tangible, and is this another tough question, I'm really serving it to both of you, what are tangible things that people with privilege and people in countries with privilege can do to help the two of you, to help queer people all over the world, and also to help Outright and Rainbow Railroad? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
I can go first on that. I mean, I think that, first of all, I always want people to be informed before they jump into action. I think there are many ways that we can use our privilege to be supportive of what's happening, but we always have to know that we're not coming from a point where like, oh, I live in a country where things are better, so I know better. Or I want to tell you how to do it. This is what I did, or this is what happened in the US or Sweden or somewhere else. Like, you always have to listen to the people who are in the country where you're hoping that some change is going to happen, and connect with them. I think that's the number one thing. Like, you have to be informed, because international pressure can be incredibly helpful. Like, I mean, Kimhali just mentioned Chechnya, where, I mean, realistically, things could be even worse if it hadn't been for international pressure. But at the same time, there are places where bringing a lot of international attention isn't necessarily going to help the people who are in that country. Sometimes silent diplomacy might actually be a better way. So it's really important, before sort of running out in the streets and rallying and protesting, to stay informed, and to know that because you live in another country, it doesn't, you don't have access to the same kind of firsthand information necessarily. So I really think that staying informed and engaging when there are opportunities that you can see are clearly informed by the people in that country, that's when you want to take action. And then, of course, I mean, anyone who's in a position to donate, I hope they would do so. Like, whether it's $5 or $50,000, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be rich to be supportive of the movement around the world. So that's, I mean, you can become a monthly donor for the price of a Starbucks coffee or something. So those are a couple of the things that I think, and I wish that more people would do.
Yeah, I really think the stay informed part is crucial. And, how do you do that? I think it's maybe a question that folks are asking. I think, again, just following our organizations is a very simple first step, right? I think if you liked our organizations on Facebook and follow us on social media, at least for Rainbow Railroad, we have this awkward place we're in, that we're not necessarily like the site you're going to go to for fun, fluffy news. But if you want to actually stay informed about what's happening, that's the source where you can go to. And a really, really important point that Maria makes that folks really need to understand is, at least for Rainbow, I know for both of our perspectives, that advocacy is driven by human rights defenders on the ground. And we can learn really important lessons on how to respond by them. A really, more recent example is, I would say we had an interesting response internationally to the announcement of Sharia law in Brunei, as an example, where it was not clear. There was a whole bunch of, if you recall, there was a number of boycott campaigns, and it wasn't clear that response was going to be as helpful to the folks on the ground. I think there are times where it can be, and I think, again, if there's a call for boycotts, then we can heed that advice. But we also have heard times where activists said this is not helpful, and we have to be really kind of mindful of when our actions might not be helpful. So I think driving campaigns that way is really useful. It's important that we stay informed in the country around how we can advance our U.S. voices for international work. Again, Outright does this work more than we do, but again, heeding the advice of international organizations when there is an opportunity to reach out to a member of Congress or official to take action is also something that can be done. And yeah, donate, like really do it, because it's crucial. Rainbow Railroad currently does not accept government funds, and so our work is funded solely on folks watching the show and others. I'd also say support folks on the ground. There's many different ways you could do that as well. If I'll continue the Facebook metaphor. If everyone wanted to right now just do a Facebook fundraiser for either of our organizations, that can bring meaningful change to both of us.
Again, beautifully said by both of you. You're both so impressive. And so, Kimhali, I'm really grateful that you spoke about social media, because I think that we hear oftentimes, like you just had a post that went sort of viral, Rainbow Railroad did, about Coming Out Day and about how it's important on Coming Out Day to remember that coming out isn't an option for everyone, and that the purpose of Coming Out Day should be that we fight for a world in which everyone can come out if they want to. And so what is the role, or what can be a role of social media in this global movement, whether it be fundraising or spreading message? Like, is that a tool that you recommend we use? And if so, how? Again, a very loaded question. So I'll let the two of you.
It's actually very simple, actually. As Maria said, you got to stay informed. And the best way to stay informed is to spread the message. I know for certain there are people watching this who will be surprised that there are so many countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy. I do a lot of these discussions, and sometimes I feel like, is this useful to say? And I could be in any audience, and people are like, oh wow, I did not know that. We've looked at the lens of progress in a very specific way, in not just America, but in most of the global north, right? Marriage equality being this marker of support. And so because we've been focused on equality, I think we've been less focused on massive inequality, even inequality in this country. And so I think social media is a powerful tool to just say things as simple as we did, that it's not as easy to come out, and that's okay. And here's why, because doing that act in some places can harm you. And I think that's really, really crucial. And I'll say there are organizations, we are, by just definition of being based in the country, financially well-off organizations. There are loose collectives that organize on social media, a lot of times under the shroud of anonymity for their own protection, but have platforms that are useful to elevate. And so just learning about what's happening just through those organizations that are organizing is also really powerful.
I agree with everything that Kimhali said. And I also think that, social media it's a global thing. Like, people are using it everywhere. And one thing that stood out to me was one of the partner organizations that we work with in Indonesia, as the crackdown started to really expand there a few years ago, they really used social media to tell. Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. It's very spread out. It consists of many islands, and they really use social media to tell people you are not alone. And I think that's a message that can resonate with all of us, because we've all felt alone at some point, being LGBTIQ people and being our whole selves. We've felt like, oh, am I the only one of all that I am? And so to use social media in that way, it's used all over the world, and it really has, I think, accelerated the pace of change in the world, which then, of course, also can lead to a backlash. I don't want to talk only about Indonesia, but just another bizarre example of Indonesian leaders wanting to ban same-sex emojis, because they felt like the emojis that people were using could be used to promote same-sex relations. So they wanted to ban them. So it is a very powerful tool. And it's also a tool that all of us have access to, that all of us can use, and all of us can use it to stay informed. So yes, social media plays it has such an enormous role.
Thank you so much for those super nuanced, but also inclusive call to action answers. Just beautifully, beautifully said. And so I'm really curious about what Rainbow Railroad and Outright International are working on right now. Like when you finish this call, what does your day look like? Or what is something that you're working on actively this week or this month?
Yeah, I can start. So look, we were having our like 10 billionth. Well, this is not Zoom, but whatever this platform is, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But whatever, we are not together having this conversation because of the global pandemic, and I think it's I know there's probably a fatigue in discussing the pandemic, but we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and that has been a challenge for our work. If you can imagine, there was at one point this year where every single border was closed off, which was like a completely unprecedented thing. And so what does that mean for folks who are displaced in their countries or people who need to escape? And as a part of our work, it's something we certainly have had to focus on. I'd say the silver lining with the pandemic is that one of the tensions with Rainbow Railroad and the global movement is, again, this notion that people need to flee their where they live to gain liberation, and that's not exactly what our mission is. We understand that relocation is an important tool and something as a last resort. But our ultimate goal and our ultimate aim is for people to be able to live their lives free of persecution. The other tension that we have is we were proud that we help about 200 people a year. But as I mentioned earlier, 3,000 requests a year means a large gap. And so we've always been thinking about different ways to help people shelter in place or find safety where they don't necessarily need to leave. And again, the vast majority of people do not want to leave where they live. And so during COVID has presented us with a challenge, but also an opportunity to kind of provide support to people in different ways. And so we've been doing that work. Proud to have supported and partnered with Outright in their really remarkable campaign. I'm sure Maria will talk about it in a second. That gave crucial support to thousands and thousands of people during COVID. A remarkable initiative that Outright led which was necessary to provide direct support to people during this time.
Thanks for the shout out, Kimhali, and it was great to cooperate with Rainbow Railroad about it. So when COVID hit, we knew that LGBTIQ people around the world would be harder hit in many ways than other people. And this is something that people don't think about. You think about, oh, we're in a pandemic, everyone's hurting. And that's true. But if you're very marginalized to begin with, the risks that you're going to hurt even more are higher. And we knew this because this is typical. We've seen it in natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes and situations like that. So at Outright, we launched a rapid research project right away to document in real time what was happening. And in parallel, we started fundraising for a COVID emergency fund to support. And actually to date, we are we've supported more than 100 groups in 60 countries around the world. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought originally that we would raise like $100,000 and give out 10 grants. By the end of June, we were over $1 million US, and that is what has allowed us to give out so many grants. But it really is crucial because when people live on the margins, they may not be welcome. Many people can go back to their biological original families, for example. But many of the people that we work with and the activists, they're not really welcome there. They can't be themselves. So that's not necessarily an option in a situation where country after country went on lockdown. Even countries that weren't necessarily so hard hit by the coronavirus went on a very strict lockdown. So people lost their jobs LGBTIQ people are overrepresented in the informal sector, so they, there wasn't an option to work from home, set up your home office. Many people immediately lost their jobs, and they didn't have any other source of income. And I think some of those things, what we're doing was, of course, first to support organizations that were helping their own communities, similar to what we talked about at the beginning. Like, we have to help our siblings. And that's what we saw. We saw people step up and donate, and really felt that sort of a surge of a global movement that we were helping each other. But the groups that we supported in country, they were literally on the ground supporting their own communities. So the next steps for us include taking this to advocacy, explaining this to the large humanitarian organizations and governments who think that when they roll out a support plan that's supposed to, help everyone, that there are so many ways that people aren't getting help. Like, we heard from this lesbian couple in the Philippines who said, well, when they went to the local government to get the help that all other families could get, they didn't get it because they didn't fit the model for a family. We heard from Sri Lanka that in some places the police stations were the centers for distribution of government help. Well, if the government criminalizes your identity, you're not necessarily going to want to walk into the police station and ask for help. So there are many ways that people aren't reached by this help, where COVID sort of just shone the light on the inequalities and if you're a trans person and your identity card does not necessarily represent who you are, but the government requires you to show a valid ID, a photo ID, and they're not going to accept that, oh, you look different, this doesn't look like your name. So there are lots of things like that COVID has exposed, and that we now want to take, steps further to really try to be part of the changes that need to happen, because this isn't going to be the last disaster where we see horrible effects like this. So that is like one of our focuses right now.
And I'll also add that, state actors will use the lockdowns to target LGBTQI people. We saw it in Uganda as an example where people raided an LGBTQI shelter and accused individuals for violating shelter-in-place orders, for being in a shelter, and were detained for months using COVID as an excuse. And so and just tying into what people can do and need to do. This is really now the time where supporting grassroots organizations in any way possible is important, because if we're thinking about long-term potential systemic change here in the United States, you can imagine what that looks like in some of these other countries, and that human rights defenders need to be just being able to survive this period of time financially in order to be able to provide a lifeline to queer folks in those countries that need support.
Absolutely. I'm going to do a little bit of a sort of a gear shift because this is NewFest, and NewFest had I think this year has sort of been, a banner year in many, many ways, but certainly for queer international representation, film, and global, that idea of that queer global perspective within film. Just in the festival, there's the Flashpoint from Poland, No Hard Feelings from Iran, and Welcome to the USA from Kazakhstan, and of course this year also Welcome to Chechnya. And so I'm wondering, what type of impact or influence can those films have on an international situation?
I think films are a way for people to emotionally connect with other people and to get an understanding of what things are like. And I think if I use Welcome to Chechnya as an example, so we're supporting the fundraising for sort of when people have seen the movie and they're upset and angry and want to do something, and they go to the Welcome to Chechnya website and donate, that outright collects that money and distributes it to a couple of the Russian groups that play a role and that you see in the film. And every morning when I open my phone and I see my email, I see people, I can literally follow where the film has been showing the most. So I see donations literally from everywhere in the world. And, people donating sometimes very small amounts, sometimes larger amounts. But it's such an immediate response. Like, people see it, they get angry, and they think, what can I do to help? And I think a lot of those people probably have never thought about global issues before. And so this becomes like an eye-opener for them. And I hope that they continue to stay informed. I hope that they watch, these films that are at NewFest to really see, like, wow, this is happening, and you can connect emotionally and realize that this is actually important. I think it's an amazing eye-opener. Not everyone can travel the world and talk to activists directly. But if you can see it in a film and you can understand that this is happening and I can play a role, I can help in some small way, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think David France, the filmmaker, knows that for Rainbow Railroad having played a important role in supporting that intervention. I was very nervous about this movie. I was very nervous about the idea of filming this kind of initiative because it was happening in real time. And from a safety perspective, just from a backlash perspective. And so I was just very nervous about the whole thing. I've since then recognized that the film was incredibly important for the reasons that Maria laid out, and also for accountability. A film is the power of film is that you bear witness on what is happening. You cannot, one of the things with Kadyrov in particular is the famous interview he had with at Real Sports, where he said that gay people don't exist, and you can't watch that film. And that film is an undisputable repudiation of that statement. You saw, and one of the weird things about Welcome to Chechnya, as I said to David after I watched it for the first time, and having been in the trenches, still leaving shocked and emotional. But I also said to him, this is a weird love story. How did you do this? And I won't spoil, but it was. And so the power to see even queer storytelling and queer emotion all over the world is what connects us. I think that's what's so crucial about film. I think that's what Welcome to Chechnya did. Again, we are having this conversation around what's happening in Poland right now, and I'm sure folks are just getting their heads around what it's like to witness what's happening there. And if it can happen in Poland, it could happen here. Right? And I think that's why it's really crucial that these films exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This conversation was so beautiful and so thought-provoking and heavy, but also filled with joy and hope. And so I just want to end. I wanted to end on a hopeful note because I think we could all use a little bit of hope. And my last question to each of you is, what is a moment or an initiative or something that happened throughout your work with your organization that you're just really, really proud of, or a moment that brought you a lot of joy that you want to share, or anything good?
Well, I really think that, a recent example, I already explained the COVID emergency fund that we had, but for me, that brings me a lot of joy to see that people are moved and they donate and they support something. and then we can turn around and be able to provide support to people who are stepping up for their communities. That to me that's an incredible joy. And it's like you require this whole chain of like companies and foundations and lots of different individuals really coming together to support something, and then being able to provide the support. And on average, I think I was looking at the statistics the other day, like on average, each of the groups that we've helped have supported 438 community members, and they are getting support that they otherwise wouldn't have been getting, thanks to like a lot of people coming together. And I think that is just part of how we can change the world. We have to change it. We can't have people like having to flee, or people getting murdered and discriminated and persecuted. Like, we have to change this world, and we have to do it together. So that's sort of what motivates me in my work.
Our one of the things I'll always remember is we're not going to be able to do Pride the same way this year, and I think there's at least for me personally, I've witnessed a cynicism around Pride in general. I think for folks who've been witnessing it for a long period of time, and every time I feel that cynicism around Pride, I'll never forget in relation to the Chechen intervention, having being able to be with one of the first arrivals during Pride, and that person I think had been in the country for maybe 24 hours after this
Wow.
horrific experience or existence, and was like able to go from escaping persecution to being in a safe house to marching in their first Pride. And I'll always remember that moment. I'll always remember because I know that we've been hearing, if I hear we're all in this together again for COVID, I'll go crazy. But in the relation, it actually is in international queer movement. It's true. From the person who donates to the person who like puts up like a protest, like a petition, that's kind of how we change this world. And so we're stronger together. Oh, I just did another one. I'm sorry. I'm sure they've all been used in campaign slogans. I know the election's coming up, but you know what I mean.
I think I know exactly what you mean, and I think the audience will also. Kimhali and Maria, thank you so much for the incredible work that you do, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Please, I urge you to follow both of their organizations and, like I said, to donate. And again, thank you both so much for being here and for the work you do on behalf of all of us.
Great, thanks so much. Check us out at rainbowrailroad.org.
All right.
Appreciate the conversation. Take care.